it is fabulous to see everybody. I am currently in London, even though I do reside in Cheshire in the UK, and I am thrilled to be part of this GPS series in 2025, as I have been over the last couple of years, and it's wonderful to see everybody this afternoon. I'm going to keep you busy. I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm going to be wanting you to get involved, so please feel free to do that. We're going to be a little bit using the whiteboards and what have you, but not a great deal, a little bit on the annotation tools. I'll get you to test those in just a second. But what I would love you to do, I see quite a lot of people popping things into chat. That's absolutely fantastic. Pop where you're coming from today and what you'd love to take away from the session and why you joined. I'm kind of intrigued as to why you joined us today, to find out what it is that we are doing, taking regulation to resilience in the aviation industry. Like Alessandro mentioned there, my background is leadership. I was a leader in retail for 20 odd years, and then I moved into the corporate space, oh, gracious me, probably how many years ago is that now? Probably about 18, 19 years ago now. And then I've been in learning and development for the last nearly 18 years now. All of a sudden feel very old, but never mind. But yes, that's a little bit about my background. So I am an accredited coach with the EMCC, and I've got 2 EQA programs as well. And one of them I've bespokely written for pilots, which I'll be sharing a little bit of information in regards to how it is that we do that throughout the session this afternoon. So like I've said, I'm super pleased to be here this afternoon. If you've got any questions or anything like that, just pop them into chat as we go along. We can answer them, but I will give a Q&A sort of 10-minute section at the end as well, if that's okay with everybody. Stu can't join us today, actually. He's in Portugal. He's at a conference called EATS, which is the European Aviation Training Symposium, and he's talking to lots of potential airlines in regards to taking our sort of programs and some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But I do have a video from him that he's going to share with us, the app and the approach that we take, like I've said, to pilot development. Neelam's saying that I'm curious to see what parallels there might be for healthcare. Oh, Neelam, absolutely. Surgeons, I've been talking to a couple of surgeons just recently. The connection and the correlation is really interesting. So let me go to share my screen with you. So I've got some slides, obviously, to share with you today. Okay, so let's get cracking. So you can see there, that's my first slide. This is all about how do we take a highly regulated industry like aviation to resilience. So I'm going to go through some of the sort of history of our organisation, and also what it is that we've developed and grown into in the 5.5 years that we've now, well, nearly 6 years actually, that we have been going. So what are we going to cover? Well, who we are. A few of you may have already heard of us. There's a couple of names that I've seen and sort of noticed from maybe previous events, etc., which is great. But some people might not know who we are. So I'll sort of explain what that is. What we do, and I suppose also how we've kind of evolved into what it is that we do, because we didn't start out to do this, but we've kind of ended up here, which I think is just really fascinating, to be honest. Also, how we do it. So this is where the sort of coaching side of things starts to really come into play. And certainly an approach that I take, especially when I'm training and developing new coaches. And well, that's exactly what I'm doing now with the pilots. So it's just fascinating, really, just to kind of see how they're kind of embodying this new approach into this sector. So that's kind of the agenda, if you like. And then I'm going to share the results. These are the results that we've been getting from over the last probably 2 to 3 years, but certainly the last 12 months where we've been working with a European airline specifically. So I'm also going to share some results with you around that. So who are we? Who is Resilient Pilot? Well, there was 2 people in the pandemic. Quite frankly, their lives was turned upside down in February and March, like a lot of people in a lot of sectors. They'd gone from flying all over the world or flying here, there and everywhere to nothing. And they were sitting in the living room. So 2 people started the organisation. 2 people were Stuart Beech. He's a A380 senior first officer with British Airways. And there's a lady called Karen Bath, who had worked in aviation for many, many years. And those two got together and decided to put some support networks into place for furloughed pilots, redundant pilots, and for pilots that, quite frankly, had had their training paused or even stopped completely. So there was a lot going on. And initially, there was probably about 6 or 7 people that had started. Within a couple of months, there was maybe 8 or 9. And I joined after about 2 to 3 months of them getting going, just to offer some coaching and mentoring support in regards to what the next steps were going to look like and what their choices were for them, either moving back into aviation or moving out of aviation, which some people did. And that's kind of what started the whole organisation. But Stuart, in his probably infinite wisdom, had a bit of a dream in the back of his mind. I think it was always something he'd wanted to do in regards to pilot development. And that started the conversations. And then when I rocked up with my EMCC accreditation, all of a sudden that really sparked his interest in regards to, well, how could we utilise this approach and make it into something that was going to transform an industry? And that's pretty much what it is that we've been doing. So like I've said, Stu is our CEO and founder. Karen's no longer with us. She stepped away a couple of years later. She'd kind of done what she needed to do. And I kind of took over the helm of managing the mentor relationships. But I also then started to design and deliver training for them from an EQA perspective and getting our our mentors accredited with the EMCC. Naomi, she joined us probably about 2 years after we started. She lives in Australia and she's our director of safety. She was a Virgin Australia captain and she'd flown for about 25 years. So lots of experience there. Lee, he's an Emirates A380 captain. He's been doing that job now for quite some time. So again, he brings a lot of experience in regards to the business development side. Johanna, she's ex-Navy and she does a lot of strategy and development as well. And again, she brings a real kind of level head and sort of, well, what about this and what about that? And it's just fabulous in regards to what Johanna brings. And then we've got Priya, who is an Air Mauritius captain as well. So that's the board. That's the Resilient Pilot directorship. And as you can probably see there, me with my tiny little headset on, I'm also doing my PPL because I also love aviation and I love flying as well. So that's me probably turning myself upside down somewhere because I also quite like aerobatics. But that's a whole other story, which maybe we'll come to later. So that's the board. We've now probably got, there's about 50 to 60 mentors. We've had some come, we've had some go, etc. But I'll share with you some stats in just a few moments. The journey has been short but long in a sense. Like I've said, we started to train our mentors in EMCC accreditation. We started to do that quite early on, within probably the first 12 months of us starting. And then we decided that we wanted to go for our ISMCP accreditation as well. And 3 years ago, we were awarded a gold ISMCP, and we've literally just had it renewed Friday. I got the email, so that was 3 years on. We've got gold again, which is just absolutely fantastic. And I played a hugely instrumental part in that, especially this one that we've just completed now. And that's been a mammoth task to get that over the line to sort of demonstrate the evidence. But what we also did, if I just kind of jump the slide forwards, is we got not only accredited with the EMCC, we also needed to get some other stuff. I'm loving that, Hayley, there with your rockets. Keep doing that. I'm loving that. We got an ATO status, which I'm going to explain some acronyms in a few moments, don't worry. We got an ATO status, which is an authorised training organisation with the Civil Aviation Authority. They're the governing body in the UK. And that means that we can also now accredit our programmes and sort of qualify our students by going through that accredited programmes with them as well. And they've also provided some funding for us down the years. So we've now kind of belt and braced most of it. There's one other accreditation that we're after, and I'll have to maybe tell you about that next year when we've achieved that as well, because there's no if, it's going to be a when. And that's pretty much how it is that we're focusing. So our mission really was, like I said right at the very beginning, it was to transform the training and the development of pilots within the aviation sector. If you've got competent pilots, safety is enhanced, etc. And of course, we wanted to make sure that we did that in line with regulation. Now, thankfully, regulation's just in the process of changing. 26, 27 is when it starts to really come into force and then be absolutely, this is not an embedding stage now, this is what needs to happen. But our vision was to be the go-to organisation for something called CBTA, and I will again explain what that is in just a second. There's lots of acronyms, so I'm not going to just throw them all at you and not explain what they are. So, like I mentioned, there's around about 70 mentors now. Over half of them are EQA and EIA qualified, which is fantastic with the EMCC. We have some others that are also qualified with the ICF as well. So we have a lovely sort of breadth of experience, which is fantastic on all different levels. We also got people sort of through the training for mental health first aid, as you can imagine. There was a decent need for that right at the very, very beginning, where people were very, very discombobulated. They had no idea which way they were going to go or the choices that they were going to make. And we also accredited people to be CBTIs, which means that they can run the training to help the pilots develop their competencies. And again, I'll explain what that means in just a second. We've just got the ISMCP award again for gold. Does everybody know what that is, the ISMCP? Does everybody know what that stands for? Nicola, do you want to pop? Actually, I was going to say, I knew there was a little finger just about to go up there. We'll pop into chat what the ISMCP is. It's basically accrediting the whole organisation to be a coaching and mentoring organisation, basically. And there's 6 separate competencies. And believe me, it takes some doing. It really does. So we've literally just, like I've said, done the 3-year re-award on that. There's 10,000 members now. We've got over 500 mentees. That's probably gone up actually since I've done these slides. And there's over 8,200 followers on LinkedIn. So we have really stepped up the pace, shall we say. And we do lots of various different programs, which again, I will share with you a little bit more detail as we move through. So acronyms, there's going to be quite a few in this particular workshop today. I'm going to be asking you some questions in just a second, but just to explain what some of these acronyms are, feel free if you want to take a screenshot of this, because there is a quiz at the end. And I don't know, chocolate mouse for the winner. I'll have to get that to you in the post. So CBTA, what is it? I'm going to explain what this is in just a second. Competency-Based Training and Assessment. So CBTA is the new way, just one second. The new way in which pilots are going to be developed. They've always had competencies that they have obviously been benchmarked against, but there's now something called observable behaviours that they now are also assessed against as well. So CBTA is pretty much how the industry is now moving towards this new demonstration of these behaviours. And again, I'll explain what those are as we move along. EBT. Well, if you're going to have demonstration of behaviours, we have to evidence it. So this is evidence-based training. So I think sometimes coaching and mentoring can be quite difficult to evidence. Well, we've managed it, which is absolutely superb. And that's, I'm going to show you how we evidence it as well. EASA is the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, and they, again, are kind of one of the governing bodies in. And also we've got IATA, who have kind of created, if you like, the CBTA and the competency-based style of training and development. ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, of course that's international. And the OBs, I'm going to be talking a lot about OBs, because this is about observable behaviours in the cockpit, on the line, when they're flying, in training, in sims, etc. So OBs has now become the new go-to word. IEs are the instructor and evaluators. So I might mention TRI, TRE, which is just below that next line. What that is, the training captain, so the person that's in charge of the aircraft, are the people that train the other pilots. And that's what that means. The TRI is training instructor. TRE is the examiner, if you like, or the evaluator. So they evaluate the instructors as well. The ATO, like I mentioned before, that authorised training organisation, is what we also gained from the CAA, which was earlier this year, probably about 3 months ago. Okay, so let's see who can remember those later on. And we will go from there. Quiz at the end. Okay, so I've spoke a little bit now about what it is that we do, and sort of just very briefly mentioned a little bit about how we do it as well, but I'm going to go into a lot more detail now. Now, I mentioned the pilot competencies and the observable behaviours. So let me ask you, what are pilot competencies? What do you think they are without me explaining? What do you think they would be? Pop that into chat. What do you think the pilot competencies are? Again, pop that into chat. Doesn't matter if you weigh out. Absolutely. Being able to fly the plane safely. Absolutely, Hayley. This is incredibly important, as you would, of course, imagine. Certainly is. I'm probably not going to read all of these. I think it's being able to drive the plane. I love that. Drive the plane. Yes, absolutely. Listening, safely flying, being able to fly, being calm. Lovely, George. Yeah, absolutely. Communication from Yolanda there as well. Hi, Yolanda. Good communication skills, staying calm, skill, knowledge, safety, communication, capacity. Lovely, Helen. Neelan's there saying deal with emergencies. Yeah, they've got to stay calm, haven't they? You know, you need a level head when you're up there. Great communicator, yeah, keeping calm, decision making, situational awareness, absolutely manic, being present. Oh, nice, Iris, love that. We've got experience making fast decisions, self-awareness. Now, this is where it starts to come in with the competencies, which is really interesting, and emotional regulation as well, Yolanda. These are the types of things actually that now really start to come into play in regards to observable behaviours, etc., as most of these are anyway, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, you are bang on. The competencies that are there so they can be observed, so they can be strived for, and so they can also be development opportunities as well for the pilots. So what are they specifically? Critical skills, like you've just been saying there, we need certain behaviours, knowledge required to operate the aircraft safely. That's the technical skills, if you like. We want to make sure that it's safe and efficient, and of course, comfortable for the passengers in the back. And of course, they're used to assess the pilot's overall ability beyond just those flying hours. You know, speak to a lot of pilots, and that's probably one of the first things that they'll say. You know, I've got 5,000 hours, I've got 10,000 hours, I've got 18,000 hours. It's one of the things that pilots kind of quantify, if you like, their experience and credibility, I suppose, to some degree too. So yes, there's lots of them. There's two different types, or there's three actually. There's two different types of the main pilot competencies. There's the technical competencies and there's the non-technical competencies. So another question. Like I've said, I'm going to be keeping you busy. I might odd time just stick a little line of full stops in just to split the chat up, that's all. What I want to know now, though, how many do you think there are? And no Googling. How many competencies do you think there are? Just pop that into chat. Ooh, Hayley's gone for 20. Catherine's gone for 8. A lot. Yolanda's saying, that's a cop-out, that is, Yolanda. 12 from Mark. Anybody else? Like I say, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference whether you're right or wrong. It's not about that. It's just, what do you think? That's all. Okay, so there's a few more come through. There's 10s as well. It's 25, 50. Flipping out, Nicola. 50. And 11 from Iris. Brilliant. Okay, I presume there's lots with some definition domains. Absolutely, there certainly is. Can't quite see. Sometimes a little thing that comes over the chat and you can't see it. Sometimes our defined domains, there it is. Okay. Okay, there are actually 9. And I know it says 8 on the bottom, just to be different, of course, they have to start with a 00, obviously. And there are some of those that are technical. In other words, how do you fly the aircraft? So, for instance, like flight path management, for instance, which is automation, so flying it on autopilot, for instance, and manual flying as well, which is where the fun is, quite frankly, the manual flight. 9 competencies, 1 more for an EMCC coach. There certainly is. And interestingly, I'll come to this in just a little while, actually. The EMCC professional framework actually goes straight over the top of the instructor and evaluator competencies, but I'll come back to that in just a little while. And I will explain what that means in just a little while. So yeah, well spotted there is what I've got to say. So the ones that we focus on, we don't train people how to fly the aircraft. The technical skills, the sims, the flight training boxes that off. Absolutely brilliant. That is superb training. I'm not saying that, you know, it doesn't need a little bit of polish occasionally. Of course it does. However, that's not the bit that we do. That's not the bit that we focus on. We focus on communication. And I'll go through these in a little bit more detail in just a moment. I apologise for the very busy slide for the next slide. Leadership and teamwork, problem solving and decision making, situational awareness. I think somebody put situational awareness in actually when I was asking what they were just a few moments ago, and I think decision making, and workload management. So it's about how do the pilots, well, work through those? How do they demonstrate the behaviours? Well, this is how. So this is the 5 non-technical pilot competencies that we work with the instructor and the evaluators and the individual pilots as well. Now, in a little while, I'm going to show you an app where the pilots can self-assess against their own competency, but they also have an opportunity to do some virtual scenario-based training as well with us. And we observe how they perform against these. And the app is where we do the grading, and the results that I will share with you at the end are some of the results that we see on a population of operational pilots that are within an airline as well in regards to their non-technical competency development. Now, I know that's a very, very busy slide, but what stands out to you from those 5 non-technical competencies when you start to drill it down maybe a little bit more than obviously the top, because the ones that are below are the observable behaviours. So the competency is communication. The observable behaviour, for instance, would be, let's look at 2.3, conveys a message clearly, accurately and concisely, and you can see whether somebody does that when they are being observed in the operational environment or in a sim, for instance. What stands out to you, if anything, from any of those slides? Is there anything there that surprises you? Oh, a couple here. They're leadership competencies, essentially. Aren't they just? Absolutely. Well spotted, Hayley. And Neelan's added, it's very coaching centric. Yes, it is. But the challenge that we were having is the training captains, the TRI, TREs, who develop these competencies in the other pilots, a lot of the time take quite a directive approach, shall we say. It would be, you didn't convey the message clearly and concisely. For instance, this is what you need to do next time. So they were very directive in their approach, which of course isn't coaching, not mentoring. So what we wanted to do was shift it to be the coach, the facilitator of their development, and of course the mentor if there was a gap in knowledge, for instance, which is, there's always going to be a gap in knowledge somewhere down the line. And when I come to everything in just a little while, you sort of see what I mean as it all starts to come together. So yeah, it is very, very coaching centric. And that's the whole point. We want the TRI, TREs to coach these competencies rather than tell them. And that is exactly how it is that we train them to do that, which in essence is what I will be sharing with you in just a little while. Now, interestingly, these competencies are introduced in the training pilot's journey. But what I want to know is, where do you think they're introduced? So I'll explain what this is. There's a line here. Right at the very beginning, this left-hand side here is their PPL, which is where they learn to fly, depending on their route, in fairness to the cockpit. This would be more a modular route. I'll explain that if anybody wants to know what that is. This is more a modular route where they go to learn to fly a small two-seater aircraft, their PPL. They then do things like their night rating. They then have 14 exams that they have to complete, which is the ATPLs. The UPRT is upset prevention. In other words, if the aircraft got into an undesired state, can they recover that aircraft? So there's a lot of loops and twists and turns and stalls that goes on in the UPRT training. They then learn to fly a multi-engine aircraft rather than a single engine. And they also have a CPL, which is their commercial pilot license, which allows them then to earn money, basically, from flying in very, very basic terms. They then have an MEIR, which is a multi-engine instrument rating, which means they can fly in fog, for instance, not have to just look out the window. And then they get right to the very end, where APS is the airline pilot standards, and the MCC is the multi-crew. So instead of them flying on their own, they're now flying with another pilot, which is something up until this stage they won't have done. So let's go back to the pilot competencies. Those 5, well, there's 9 in total, as we know. Where do you think in this journey that they are introduced? Put your annotation tools on. You can use your pens and just circle, where do you think those are introduced? Okay, so Penny's gone for CPL. Pop your annotation tools on. Neelam's gone for, yeah, I think that was a very similar place there. UPRT, okay. So upset prevention. Anybody else? Hayley's gone for there as well, UPRT onwards. Gradually introduced to training as they are all part of being a pilot. They certainly are, Mark. Oh, now we've got somebody gone to the other end. We've got George gone to the PPL stage. Okay, I think that's probably everybody. Can't see anybody else popping anything on. Okay, let me just take those down. So, where at the moment it's introduced traditionally is here, right at the end. So they've gone through that whole training journey, and may I add, this training journey might take 18 months. It might take 3 years, 4 years. It depends on the route and the style of the training. So traditionally, it's there, right at the very end, APS MCC. So where do you think we introduce them then? So back onto your annotation tools. If you can draw around them rather than use your named arrow, which seems to be causing the problem, I don't know why, that would be awesome. Where do you think we introduce them? Resilient pilot. Okay. So we've gone right to the other end now. Yeah. I think Catherine's gone to that end. Penny's gone ATPL stage, which is the 14 exams. So we've got Neelam down here. We've got Catherine. Absolutely. I can't see anything else. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we've got somebody else as well. And Hayley's gone there. Yeah. So everybody's moved there to the left. Absolutely bang on. So let me just clear those down again. We've actually partnered with a brand new flying school, actually. And this is their USP. Nobody else is doing this. We introduced the pilot competencies actually at ATPL stage formally. However, we have people that do start them. I've got a mentee at the moment that started them when he was doing his private pilot's license. He hadn't even passed his PPL. And he was doing some of we call them CDSs, the virtual scenarios. He was doing some of them. He had no idea what was going on. He was completely bamboozled at the beginning, but that's fine, because once he'd done 2 or 3 or 4, he's off and running now. So all the way through his journey now, so when he gets to APS MCC, right at the very end, that training there, where it's now all about multi-crew, he's not having to unlearn how to fly an aircraft on his own. He actually knows the pilot competencies. He knows what's expected of him. He's practiced it. He's done it. So it's making a huge difference in the training schedule. What's your thoughts on that? I'm just interested in what's kind of people's thoughts on that. I know Mark said gradually introduced. And you're absolutely right there, Mark. They were. Anybody else got any other thoughts on what difference do you think that would make? Which I suppose is in a sense my next question. It's what's the benefit of introducing them so early? Consistency and normalizing the coaching approach. Brilliant, Neelam. Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Hayley's had time to learn and embed the competencies before they are absolutely needed. Brilliant. Catherine's added there. Yes, they are a thread throughout. They certainly are. Nicola, making sure that we get good routine yet. And embedding professional behaviours from the start. Absolutely. And do you know what? Flying is all about confidence, as you can probably imagine. And when they get to APS MCC, it's a big change for them. It's another very, very steep learning curve for them to go from single pilot operations to multi-crew. And then all of a sudden, not only have they got to fly with 2 people, but they've also got all of this stuff that they need to also demonstrate. It's a lot. So we're actually flattening out a little bit that learning curve for them. So I absolutely agree. Changing behaviours requires a long time. Of course it does, Oliver. So it's all about, it is all about actually, how can we flatten that out for them to help them and just not have so much to do and so much to think about. As you can imagine, it probably causes a lot of stress as well. So what is it that we actually do with these pilot competencies then? So I mentioned earlier about them self-assessing, for instance, and of course running CDSs, which is the virtual observable, if you like, behaviours kind of session that we've created. What we also created, though, was an app, and this is the app. This has only been launched this year, actually. It's probably only about 4 or 5 months old now. And each of the pilot competencies, you can probably see down in that bottom right-hand corner of the iPad screen, you can see communication, problem solving and decision making, workload management, leadership and teamwork, situational awareness, etc. So what they would do is they would grade their own performance. In other words, they would self-assess after they've done one of these virtual sims. Their observer, their CBTI, who was running the session, or their coach, if you wish to call them that, has also graded them. So they get a correlation of grades. But what they also get is, you can probably just see underneath, they get some orange or amber behaviours. The green ones are where they demonstrated it, and that's okay. It's not to say that they don't need developing and they're not going to be continued to be developed. However, the amber behaviours are the things that they may want to specifically work on right now. Now, they can do that one-to-one with a coach and mentor if they wish, or we also have a hub that we can send them to where we've got some self-directed learning as well. But the other thing that, of course, they can do when they're going through that training that I showed you before, that path, if you like, they are assigned a mentor right the way through. So they might, let's just say situation awareness there has got one little amber one, and whatever competency that was, they can go to their mentor and say, I'm struggling with this. You know, what is it that I need to do to kind of improve this? And the coach / mentor will then start to understand what it is that's maybe going on for that particular person and coach them first. And then, if required, they can then share some insight if they so wish and if that is appropriate, as the mentor hat goes on. And that is how we do it. So it's a complete holistic system right the way from the very beginning of their training, right the way through to them retiring. So it's aspire, if you like, to retire. It's right the way across the board. Nicola's just popped on as well. Could we develop a coaching competencies app which might feed into supervision, seeing this sparking lots of thinking? Well, what I'm going to show you in just a few moments is what we do to develop our coach and mentors. So we're already doing it, in essence, to that. So yes, and it's on the app. So that's how we develop our mentors internally as well. But I wouldn't be able to tell you that just yet. That was coming up, Nicola, but I've told you now. So the CBTA that I mentioned earlier, this is what it's all about. It's about competency-based training and assessment. So it's having that particular individual that's trained to observe that particular session. They can then grade them, then they can then discuss their gradings and facilitate the debrief. And like I've said, any amber behaviours, they can then go off into the hub. And I'll show you the hub in just a few moments when Stu is talking. This is the hub here. So we've got some self-directed learning. So competency 7.2 here, monitors and assesses the airplane's energy states, etc. And this is one of the things that you might well be able to kind of develop away from a sim, or do some self-directed learning. And like I've said, then get back into that sort of environment where, of course, you can then implement some of those new behaviours or new skills that maybe would help you demonstrate that even better. So it's not a case of it being right or wrong. This is about continuous development. What was that there, Mark, saying there? Exciting to see this ability to monitor. I am using the 6 app currently to work with clients. Oh, that's interesting, Mark. What's the 6 app? I'd love to know. Pop that into chat for me. I'd love to know. And like I've said, that is what we do. There's also something else that we do linked into when we became an ATO status. So if I just flick back to the slide, just for a second. I'm not going to specifically mention this, but you might have spotted here where it's got ATPL here, KSA 100. So what has also been introduced is knowledge, skills and attitudes, further development whilst they're doing their exams. Well, we needed to be an ATO status to be able to facilitate that learning. And that's exactly what we've done. So we also do the KSA 100 knowledge, skills and attitude, which is also linked to those competency-based virtual scenarios as well. And that's something else that we do. So you can probably see a little bit more detail here. Stu's going to go through it with you in just a few moments anyway on a video for you. And it gives you a grade. So you can see your overall pilot competence, for instance, there, like I've said, there'll be amber competencies, there'll be green competencies, and then you get a little flight path as well. So you can kind of see where you are in the journey in regards to that personal development plan. And this is bespoke. And what Stu's going to also talk to you about is how we can see this from an airline perspective. So if we have a group or a cohort of pilots, we can then see that from the cohort perspective as well. So you can see here the pilot competencies, the instructor competencies, confidence and resilience scores as well in regards to things like personal countermeasures, etc. We can also grade those. So who trains the pilots? Now, I've already told you this. I'll go back to that in just a few moments, Mark. Thank you. Who trains the pilots? So the first officers, who trains them? I've told you this before. Let's see if anybody could remember. Thanks, Nicola. Next letter was R. Yay, TRI. Absolutely. So the TRIs, TREs, it most certainly is. Yes, they're known as the training captains. So we have instructors, which obviously deliver the sims, sort of simulated the very big, multi-million pound sims and some of the virtual scenarios as well. And the examiners or the evaluators train them. So the TRI population. But who trains them? So who trains them then to train people? Yolanda's laughing. It's like, wow, there's a lot of training. Us! Absolutely, Neelam. Chocolate mouse for you. There certainly is. Yes, we do. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the airlines don't do this, because of course they do. That goes without saying. But this is where our specialism really starts to come into play. Not only do we train the pilot competencies and we develop the individuals or groups, but actually it's the TRI, TRE population that we really focus our attention on, because if we get that right, if the TREs and the TRIs are highly trained in regards to how to get the best out of the other population, surely it's a win-win. So yeah, you're absolutely bang on. We do it. We train the TRIs, TREs. But what we also do is we facilitate the development of the others. We also facilitate the development of our own mentors within the organisation and the accredited coaches / mentors. So how do we do that? Well, I went to write a model because I needed something to kind of explain what it was that we did. But Hector had beat me to it. And this particular model was already in existence. However, it didn't have the pilot competencies wrote over the top. So when I developed and wrote the EQA program to develop bespokely the mentors, the TRIs, TREs, and the pilots, what we did was we tagged the competencies specifically and the observable behaviours to the TRI, TRE competencies, because there's more competencies. This whole airline, this whole aviation sector is just one big competence. And so is the EMCC. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to start from what I felt was the baseline skill, coaching. Let's teach people to really effectively question. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail about that in just a second. That then dovetailed into the mentoring. Well, let's understand what we're mentoring first. Surely we need to understand what the gap is. That then started to dip into the facilitation of debriefs, of sim sessions, etc. And of course, it dipped into the training. So the competencies that you see there on the screen are not the pilot competencies. These are the TRI, TRE competencies, which I'm going to share with you in a little while. But coaching sits right over the top of all of them. Now, when I look back at my career, and even as a manager in my shops, the biggest team I ever led, I think, was about 84 people. And I started to realise that I'd been doing this for a long time, but I just didn't kind of know what I was doing. I always led with questions, and I wanted to understand things from other people's perspectives or other ideas. So to me, it just seemed like the most, I don't know, sensible thing to do. So that's how and why I've developed the EQAs the way I have. Let's start in that bottom left-hand corner and let's go from there. So what we also look at is different types and styles of questioning. So a pilot would traditionally, like I've said, tell them what it is that they did wrong and tell them what they need to do differently or better next time. Well, I wanted to change that completely. So if we go to the facilitator side, first of all, on the right-hand side, there was something that I learned many years ago when I joined L&D, and it was called backwards questioning. And at first I was kind of like, what the hell does that mean? Well, what I think that means, and this is my version of it, is if there's some knowledge that you want to tell somebody, I've been doing it with you today, why not ask the question first to test their knowledge, to see where they're at? Then that might dovetail off into mentoring, that might dovetail off into coaching. We don't know until we ask the question. So that backwards questioning is all about, actually, what do you know that would be useful for them to know, but by asking them a question first. So it's about getting that kind of outside knowledge in, but testing it first. Now, one of the things that pilots didn't necessarily do was coach at all. They might have done a little bit of that, but more around the technical training, the facilitator side, but not about the non-technical stuff. So I wanted to teach them to coach, to switch the question to a person-centered question. Well, talk to me about your thought process when you were coming into land, etc. Those types of questions, and to go deeper into that more psyche side of things and start to get them to reflect and think about their behaviour rather than just a skill. Now, this takes it much deeper. Now, when we've been running these programs with a European airline, we've done some training virtually, live, but virtual. But we said we need to do this face-to-face. And that's exactly what we've been doing. So one day, one full day, we've got TREs in a room. We teach them to coach and facilitate. We have a lot of fun along the way. And then we put them into a sim environment the following day with 2 trainee pilots, where they have to facilitate the development of those 2 pilots that are flying the sim. And it's been fascinating watching that journey and that process that they go through. They go to default initially, questioning all around the technical skills. And then when just a little knock occasionally, or a little, which approach are we taking now type question, and all of a sudden the penny drops and they get it. And then when you ask the pilots that they were developing, the 2 in the seat, they're like, oh my God, that felt so much better. It didn't feel like an interrogation. It felt like there was space to think, to learn, to reply, to make a mistake. There was space. The difference was huge. So we've been running, like I've said, these face-to-face events. We've got 10 to run. There's 120 TRIs that we're developing. And we've been doing that over the last few months, and we'll be doing that into next year as well. And there will be other airlines that we do this. And I'm going to share some of the results that we have from that. So that is how we are teaching the CBTA approach in regards to IATA and the competencies for the instructor and evaluators, which I'm going to share with you in just a few moments. So this is now written into regulation that they need to take this approach, not only for their own development, but actually also for the pilot population, for their development as well. And I think this develops them professionally, personally, and of course, from a kind of technical perspective as well, because actually that development all of a sudden feels very different. Interestingly, CAP, the Centre of Aviation Psychology, has done some research on pilot training, and I've not got it on slide actually, and the anxiety that is created around the training. What percentage of pilots do you think get severely anxious around their sim checks every 6 months? What percentage would you say? 70% Nicola's gone for? Because if they don't perform, ultimately they lose their job. And this happens once every 6 months. What do you reckon? 85, 80, 85? These are really high. 90. Absolutely. It's actually, and I'll pop it into chat as well. Oh, if it lets me type. There we go. It's actually 55%. But how many more aren't speaking up? How many more aren't admitting that? So this approach, we know, is going to make a huge difference in regards to pilot anxiety and pilot performance when they are being checked. But the other thing that we're also doing is between the checks, pilots don't normally have any development other than flying in the aircraft and on the line. What we do is we give them development every month for 90 minutes. So when they come to do their sim checks every 6 months, they feel so much more secure. They feel like they're a bit more knowledgeable, if you like, and they feel far less anxiety because they've just done maybe 5 different scenarios and they've been coached and facilitated in those scenarios. So I can't wait to see what that figure comes down to, is what I can't wait to see. The way that they do their assessing and grading when they are being observed is called ORCA. So they would observe the pilot doing whatever it is they're doing, flying the aircraft, and there's always a scenario, there's always an engine failure or a fuel loss or a sick passenger or something's cracked off in these sim checks, always. So they use ORCA, they observe what it is that they've seen, they'll record it, they'll classify it, They'll then assess it. And then the D is that development side of things where they then do their debriefing. And what we do in regards to this is we kind of have a process, if you like, where we do a facilitated briefing. What are we going to be doing today in this particular flight? How do we want to work together, etc. So the contract, if you want to call it a contract, you know, how can we get the best out of each other? How do you want me to challenge you today? For instance, TRE, TRR would be asking. We then do a facilitated loft session, which is a line orientated flight training session. That's what that means, where we have created 36 virtual scenarios where we can develop the pilots separately. We then do a facilitated debriefing, or they do, with the two pilots flying. And then, of course, they classify, self-assess, etc. And then they develop those competencies in the operational environment. And again, this isn't happening. So if something had happened in a sim, for instance, if you had a learning point, you don't take that into the cockpit on the line. That would be brought into the next sim, if at all. Whereas now with us, we bring that in continuously, right the way through their pilot development, from the sims, from their monthly little checks, if you like, or their little, not checks, their little development opportunities, and then take that into the operational environment as well, because it's in the pocket. It's an app, it's on their phone. So there's lots of different things, like I've said, that we can do here. We've got the measurement side of things, we've got the pilot competencies, and we've also got the hub where they can go and do their own self-directed learning as well. Now, I mentioned that there was instructor and evaluator competencies. I won't ask you how many you think there are. I'll just tell you. In this particular one, there are actually 5. And you might be thinking, well, that looks like there's only 4. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? The 5 are actually the first one, the first pilot competency here on the top left, IEC 1. That is having knowledge and mastery over the 9 other pilot competencies. So they've got to know their stuff. Now, these competencies for the instructor and evaluators are relatively new, and this is what's coming into regulation. The other pilot competencies have been around a little while, but it's these that now are starting to change the game. Now, you might notice management of the learning environment. If you take that as a coaching session, for instance, that would be things like contracting, etc., those types of things. Instruction, that would be around, you know, your approach. Interaction with trainees, and you've got assessment and evaluation. So these are the competencies that we have connected the EMCC competency framework, or the professional framework, to, and it overlaid around about 80%, there or thereabouts. So when we are developing our internal mentors, this is what we benchmark those against, and that's how we do it. But the 2 of the competencies that we specifically look for in the TRI, TRE development. Now, these overlay 100%. But there's one competency there that really matches with the EMCC. Which one is it? All you have to do is put the number in. So you've got the competency, which is interaction or instruction, and then the observable behaviours are the 4.1s, 4.2s, blah, blah, blah. So which number do you think completely goes across the EMCC? So 4.9, Nicola's gone for. Actively seeks and accepts feedback. Absolutely. But which other one? They all do, in fairness. But which one do I really bang the drum about? Oh, 3.12. I'm loving this. Provides positive reinforcement. Absolutely. 3.9. Absolutely. Encourages trainees to self-assess. Absolutely. They all map over. But what's 4.5? It's coaches the trainees. So that is why we start there. Coaches the trainees. And that's the EQA that I've developed with that specific thing in mind. So what I want to share with you now is I'm going to share a video. And this is Stu. This is our CEO. He was actually away on holiday at the time. This was a few days ago. He's now at EATS, like I've mentioned. He's at a conference, an aviation conference. And I'm just going to go to share the sound. It should be sharing anyway. I've just double checked that. I'll start the video, but then I'll have to restart it. For some reason, when I start it, it freezes. No idea why, but it is. So I'm going to start the video and let Stu just sort of explain. It's about 3 or 4 minutes. And just let Stu explain in just a little bit more depth about the app and the hub. So here we go. Just give us a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Well, all the delegates at the GPS EMCC conference. I believe at this stage, Sam Sloan was probably saying that Stuart's recorded a video from his holiday in Cadiz. Well, here it is. And I probably understand that Sam will have taken you through our system, which is an evidence-based, competency-based training development system developed over the last 5 years. And here's our platform, which Sam would have introduced. I'll just share the screen. Okay, so we have airline pilots who undergo regular training and assessment. What I'm going to show you is our grading system first, which what happens is an instructor would observe, in this case, another instructor delivering a training session in a flight simulator. And what we're looking for, an instructor has a set of competencies and associated behaviors. A competence is made up of those behaviors. The first competency that we all start with as pilots and instructors is to ingrain and have mastery over the pilot competencies, 9 competencies, and 73 associated behaviors. So an instructor essentially has to facilitate the learning and development of those 73 behaviors for their trainees. In this case, we have a grading system, time-based grading system, where we can make notes, and we actually tag. You'll see here, we tag the behavior. The behavior is green if demonstrated timely and effectively. It's amber if that behavior requires some development, or it was expected but wasn't effective. Okay, and then by adding up all the different behaviors, we have a scientific system where the instructor or the pilot is graded between 1 and 5, 1 being unsafe, 5 being exemplary. In this case, this instructor's got 4s across the board, which means an excellent performance. What happens now is, in the industry, up until now, this is where it's finished. Not anymore. We introduce a platform called the Resilience Deck, whereby the pilot, those scores at the behavioral level, gets transported to the pilot, and in this case, the instructor, and the instructor can then work on those amber behaviors in between training sessions, or indeed take those and implement those learned behaviors or those behaviors for development to the operational environment. You click on the behavior, and it takes you through a little learning journey. 3.7 adapts to situations. You open that up and you'll see there's a journey. Now, for each behavior, we've defined them as developing the knowledge for that particular behavior, the skills, and Sam's done a superb job here with this particular application on various scenarios that the instructor or the pilot can then put into practice, and these scenarios are decision-making trees. So each behavior is developed. You add up all the behaviors, you get an increase in performance and resilience for the pilot and instructor population. Each instructor, each pilot is individual. They all have individual behaviors that they can develop. And it's a tailored, personalized journey. However, one final thing before I leave is any head of training, any training manager can actually see at the different levels for the population. So for in this case, there's going to be 150 instructors at a major European airline. So we can actually see that instructor performance at the behavior level. And we can then shape future training. You can see here the highest amber behaviors that need developing for this particular population. We can shape the journey, the learning journey, tailored and specific to that population. And that is our evidence-based, competency-based training and development approach, in particular through coaching, mentoring, and facilitation. Well, I'm Stuart Beech, CEO and founder of Resilient Pilot. Hand you back over to Sam. Have a wonderful conference. We'll see you next time.
Okay, so that's our Stu, who just sort of explained a little bit more detail about the app and about how that is absolutely changing training in aviation. At the moment, we're the only business and organisation in the world that's doing what it is that we are doing. But we do have people on our tail, 100%. We know this. We know that we're already getting people copying what it is that we're doing, etc. I suppose it's the most perfect form of flattery, I suppose, isn't it, where people copy you, but nonetheless. It's just fascinating just watching now how different airlines are actually taking this approach. So that was Stu, like I've said, sort of sharing a little bit more in regards to sort of that side of things and how it is that we're continuing that development, not only with the pilot population, but with the TRI, TREs as well. And like I said earlier, the quality of that instructor and evaluator development, it has a direct impact on the trainee pilot development, irrelevant of what stage they are at. It doesn't make any difference. They might have been flying for years. They still get trained. They still get assessed. They still get checked. And we want to really change that. Phenomenal. Are you approaching to other airlines out of the UK? Oh, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. I don't want to say it incorrectly. I really do apologise. But we're not going UK. We're going global. We're talking to lots of airlines around the world. I just did the conference in Singapore. Stu is at the one that was in Portugal at the moment, and me and Stu did the one in Florida. So we've covered the whole world. We're talking to lots of airlines about this approach, and they love it, which is absolutely fantastic. So I've got a feeling we're going to be pretty busy over the next few years, which is absolutely superb. Like Stu's just mentioned, if we train really effectively the TRI, TRE population to facilitate, to coach, to mentor, in line with regulation, but not just meeting regulation. This isn't just about ticking a box. This is actually about real development, real change to an industry that, well, it's been incredibly successful, but then what's next? How can they continue that excellence into the future? And that's what's the most important thing. Now, I was going to pop you into a breakout room, but we're kind of running out of time a little bit. So I'm just going to ask you this question. I'm interested, where is the opportunity in your organisation? Now, you already mentioned healthcare earlier. Where is the operation in your organisation or field for competency development? It doesn't have to be competency-based. Or development with a coaching and mentoring approach. Pop that into chat, open your mics, because then once we've had a chat through this, I'll share with you the results and we'll move into the Q&A anyway at around about 20 past. Everywhere. I love that. Yeah. There is an opportunity everywhere. I agree. Leadership. I do a lot of leadership training. I think the coaching approach for a leader, I think, is going to be the most required skill, I think, going forwards into the future. I really do. And that's just leaders. Staff and students, absolutely. Some. All leadership development. Haley just said, yeah, there you go. Nicola's just added there. See opportunity for a client I'm supporting that wants to implement coaching and mentoring into its members' professional body into healthcare. Yeah, absolutely. As a member benefit, brilliant. Elite sport, absolutely, Yolanda. I know exactly what it is that you do. And this is another thing where there's a great opportunity now to really embed the power of coaching. Because so many people think it's just fluffy. It's fluffy, this coaching stuff. Really? Hope you can see your involvement in Canada. So if not already, absolutely. We're talking to a couple of Canadian airlines. You would be pleased to know, Mark. Hospitals, again, Nicholas said there, what I love about this is that you can measure it and keep it on track. Absolutely. So this isn't a one and done. This is continuous development for your whole career. There might be sometimes you're ahead. There might be sometimes you're a bit behind. That's cool. That's okay. We're only human. And that's about, for me, bringing the human into the cockpit, bringing the human into lots of organizations where maybe that was a little lacking previously. Love the app. It makes it so measurable. Absolutely, it certainly does. And like I've said, this is about how we develop our internal coaches and mentors as well. So those competencies that you've just seen there go straight over the top of the EMCCs. So that's how we develop our internal coaches as well. Career progression and transition, general resilience in high pressure environments. Absolutely. Super high pressure environments. You've got elite sport, like Yolanda just mentioned. You've got healthcare, for instance, very, very, sort of high pressure environments, cockpit, these types of jobs. This is tough. These are tough jobs. You've got work-life balance with changing family commitments. Absolutely, completely agree with you. This changes the game. This makes it personal, specific, tailored, not sheep dipping, which is sometimes what we see in organizations when they say, oh, let's roll out a leadership program. Okay, yeah, they've just picked it off a shelf. Somebody else has had it delivered to them, probably got great results. I'm not saying that, but actually, how do we tailor it to that population? How do we change the game for lots of different organizations and people within them? So who would like to see the results? Absolutely, Nico's like, yay, woo, 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 go for it. Absolutely. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the results that we've got. So suppose what would success and will and does success look like? We want it fully inclusive. This is where we're giving everybody the opportunity to perform at the best. Like in any role, some people perform more easily, some people need a bit more additional training, etc., etc. This is giving everybody the opportunity to do that. And that's incredibly inclusive, and that is exactly what we want. Oh, no problem, Kathleen. Thank you. Increased success, of course. Reduced attrition. This is something that we're seeing with a lot of people. People are leaving organizations for many different reasons. More resilience. Again, able to cope better with that high pressure. It comes at a cost. Well, actually, how can we flatten that out as well? Students able to transition again. And like it says there, we're empowering students now rather than, quite frankly, disempowering students. So let's have a look at some of the actual distributions that we've seen. Now, this was in a population of pilots where we trained them over a 6 to 12-month period. Now, what we basically want to see in the curves like this, so you can see on average, they were roughly around about 3s in regards to their competency development, and they were scoring roughly 3s, which is, don't get me wrong, that's acceptable, that's cool in the non-technical competencies. However, what we actually want to see is that arc move across to the right. So they're now demonstrating more observable behaviours, and they're getting higher scores, which generally means that they are, they're doing, if you like, more observable behaviours, or they're, can't think of the word, sort of demonstrating them better, shall we say. So let's have a look what happens. It moves right the way across to 4. A pilot for 5, like Stu said, this is exceptional. If a pilot's continuously getting 5, this is where there is no room for improvement. This is almost like the perfect pilot. Well, The perfect human doesn't exist. There's always something to develop. And that's exactly what it is that we've started to see. But look at the increases. Communication went up by over almost 22%. Leadership and teamwork, almost 30%. That's incredible. Problem solving and decision making was around about 17%. Situational awareness, 16%. Workload management, 17%. So the average increase was just over 20% in performance. If you could have an uplift of 20% in performance in your organisation, would you take that? Of course we would. Everybody would. Why wouldn't you? So that is pretty much what it is that we've been doing. So that's kind of sort of showing it in a little bar chart. And again, this has been with no problem. I understand that people have to leave. Thank you very much for popping that in. It's been lovely having you. And this is what we've been seeing over the population over, like I've said, this last 6 to 12 months. And the data's just building. The more that we deliver this to pilots, the data's building. And it's also showing that actually, the more they do, the greater the development is and the more that goes up. But we're seeing at the moment that average of around about 20%. And like I say, that's what it is that we've been seeing. We're also going into schools and colleges. We're introducing this into schools and colleges. We're actually in Oldham next week, I think it is, where we're taking an A350 simulator into a college to encourage people to join the aviation industry. Can't wait to have a go at that A350. Let's see if I can land it. We'll give it a go. I'll give it my best shot. But that is pretty much what it is that we have been doing, and that is the approach that we have been taking. So, quiz time. Fastest finger first. What is EBT? Evidence-based training. Woohoo! Hayley gets the chocolate mouse. Yeah, emotional behavioural therapy. I think it probably should be, and it's probably a lot of that, if I'm being really honest. Absolutely, it certainly is, yeah, evidence-based training. Okay, how many pilot competencies are there? 9. Nicola, you're not meant to answer. Yeah, there's 9. There certainly is, even though it looks like there's 8, because it starts with a 00. Okay, next question. What are OBs? Absolutely loving this. Yeah, observable behaviours. It most certainly is. And the final question, how many instructor and evaluator competencies are there? Oh no, I put it on the screen. Nobody look. How many are there? You've probably already seen that. That was a bit of a trick question, because there was one that was about the mastery of the others. There was 5. There certainly was. Absolutely, yeah. Well done, everybody. Brilliant stuff. So I'd like to know, I'll stop sharing my screen for just a moment. I'd like to know, what questions do you have to me?
How long does it take for someone to go through the whole program, Sam? Or does everybody do it at a different pace?
They can do it at a different pace. The guys that come through with the flying school, we generally put them on the program right the way through their whole flying journey. But we also do programs where we just put them on for 12 months, for instance. It just depends what that person needs and what they want to do.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome, Hayley. Your work is brilliant, and was this, as was this session. Thank you. So much to ponder. Need to leave for a client call at the bottom of the hour. Thank you, Sam. Oh, you're most welcome. What I will do then, Mark, just before you go, I'll pop into chat my LinkedIn profile. So if anybody wants to add me on LinkedIn, please don't just follow me, connect with me. I don't know why LinkedIn's doing that at the moment. Please connect with me. That would be absolutely awesome if you could do that. And if you wish to, you know, carry on any conversations, or if you have any other questions, please feel free. In what areas do pilots typically need more support? That is actually a very, very good question. Believe it or not, communication is something. Workload management is something else, where there is a lot to do in a cockpit. There really is an awful lot to do. So that workload management tends to be something where it needs a little bit of polish, shall we say, but also leadership and teamwork. You know, they're used to flying on their own, especially at the beginning. You know, when they get so involved in the task, shall we say, sometimes of flying the aircraft, that they kind of forget that there's somebody that can take some of those tasks off them to the side of them. So that's a really good question, actually. But we see, you know, lots of different people have lots of different needs. So that's the beauty of this bespoke system, I suppose. Do pilots tend to have more? Yes. In a very simple answer, yes. So what we tend to find is when we do the training and we put them into the environment where they are to facilitate the development of 2 other pilots, they tend to focus specifically on the technical skills, like flying the aircraft, whereas actually the non-technical competencies sometimes they barely kind of touch. And that's been a shift for them. And I think the realization that it's those non-technical competencies that are driving the technical competencies. And I think that's a real big kind of eye-opener for them, to be honest. So that's another really good question. Thank you, Mark. I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I've always loved aviation from being a little girl. So for me to marry my career of being a leader and a coach and a mentor, now to work with pilots who I have admired for many, many years, flying big metal things in the sky, to flying them myself. You know, when they say you don't work a day in your life if you love what you do, that is how I feel, genuinely. I love this industry, and to have an opportunity to have an impact in this industry for me is an absolute privilege, and I love working with with aviation. It's fascinating.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank
You're
you
welcome.
everybody. It's been a real treat to have this. It's been just like a massively brilliant show and tell that you've laid out your rationale and the approach that you took, and I think there's something in every step that you shared. There was something that we could all take out of that, and I'm thinking, oh, we could do something like this here, there, and everywhere, and just the application for lots of different sectors about how we could take your thinking and map it against competencies. I've got all kinds of things going in my head at the moment. So thank you for leading this discussion. It's been a really great one. I've got one question for you actually before we move into networking. I mean, we've had some really good ideas that have been shared in the chat and some great questions. What is it that surprised you? Is there anything that sticks in your mind? What surprised you about the discussion today?
I think when people say just how transferable this is, we kind of thought it was, but then when you ask people, I think that realization of that it is the bit that has probably surprised me. Yeah.
And thank you for putting your LinkedIn in the chat. And most people do take Sam up on her offer to go to connect with her, and I'm sure that Sam would be super happy to I was going to say advise or coach, but to have a chat with you about how you might apply that to a different sector as well. So thank you, Sam, and thank you for everybody here.